So now that we've covered some of the main setup and accessories for your violin, I would like to talk about something that requires a little bit more effort, and that's how to set up and hold your bow properly. Now, when it comes to the bow hold, that's something that actually makes a lot of people panic to the point where they just give up and decide that they're going to hold the bow in whichever way they want. And now, this is something that I would very strongly advise against, not because I'm a purist or a traditionalist in any way, but because there is actually a reason why the bow hold has evolved in such a way over the past however many 100, 500, 600 years. And it's because it's actually the most natural and comfortable way for you to actually transmit, those musical intentions onto your violin. Remember that anything that you apply onto the violin, it's going to be reflected back into the sound. So if you apply lots of stress and tension and force onto your violin, your sound is also going to be stressed and forced. So if you'd like to have a relaxed, natural sound, you yourself also need to be natural and relaxed. And so now, before we start, the first thing you need to keep in mind is that when your bow is not being used, the hair of your bow is always going to be loose. So as you can see here, the hair is fairly relaxed. Once again, don't touch the hair with your hands, but I'm showing you how it looks like so that you don't have to do it yourself. The reason why you don't want to touch the hair is because any oil, sweat, fat, and anything you have on your fingers, even if you wash your hands hundreds of times a day, it's going to stick to the hair, and eventually it's going to get dirty, it's going to turn black, and it doesn't matter how much rosin you put on your bow, it's just not going to sound anymore, so you're going to have to change your hair. So avoid touching it, but you can see right here that the hair is actually fairly loose. And before you actually play, you want to turn the screw down here at the bottom of your bow to tighten the hair. Now, how much you want to tighten it, that's fairly relative and it's up to you, but the general rule is that when you look at your bow this way, find more or less the middle point of the bow, that's kind of around here. You want the space between the hair and the stick of your bow to be just as wide as the thickness of the stick itself. More or less, this is not an exact science, but for example, if you find your bow like this, that's going to be, of course, too loose, so you're not going to have enough tension in the hair to get the right reaction or the right sound out of your bow. And on the other hand, if you tighten it too much, for example, like this, then the bow is going to be too tense, too nervous, it's going to be difficult to control. And if you tighten it beyond that, you could eventually damage the wood of the bow as well. So as a general rule, like I said, just to recapitulate, around the middle point of the bow, so kind of around here, you want the space between the hair and the stick to be just as wide as the stick itself. So now, once you've tightened your bow to the right level of tension and you've rosined your bow properly, which we're going to talk about in later parts of this module as well, we're going to work now on how to hold the bow the right way. And to do that, you can go ahead and take your left hand and hold the bow around the middle just so that it stays balanced and you have the frog to interact with freely. Now, the first thing you want to do is take your thumb and stick it facing up like this, facing upwards. You want to stick it right in this brown bit between these two black bits, the frog and your poussette, your leather thumb rest right here. So you're going to stick the tip of your thumb right there like so. Now, right here at the very beginning of the bow, don't worry about touching the hair with your thumb, that's okay. Now, the next step is going to take your pinky finger and set it right on top of what we call the eye of the bow, this little mother of pearl ornament right here. So you want to set it right above that, round, like this. Okay? So try to avoid doing things like this or having a straight finger like that. Try to keep your finger rounded. So if you do it without your bow, you're basically doing this with your hand. But once again, you set your thumb down here and your pinky finger on top of the bow, on top of the eye of the bow in a rounded manner like so. The reason for that is because your pinky finger is actually going to be the counterbalance for the bow. So if you don't use your pinky finger properly, your bow is going to, you're going to drop it. So you want to make sure that your fulcrum is right here, your thumb, and your counterweight, your pinky, is right on top of the eye. That's going to allow you to keep your bow balanced, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you to use it later. Now, for the next step, these two middle fingers, your second and third finger, or middle and ring finger, you're just going to set them up comfortably on top of the bow, right around this line right here. You're going to set this on the bow stick. So once again, thumb, pinky finger rounded, and then these two fingers are just lying down, covering the thumb, right? So now it starts to look a little bit like this, and then the last finger, your index finger, curling around the silver bit of your bow right here. Never like this, never standing like your pinky finger, but actually lying down and curled around the stick. That's your basic bow hold. Now you can go ahead and slowly release with your left hand, and your bow should be safely nestled in your right hand. Now after you've done this, once again like with your shoulder rest, my best advice is to do it all over again. So let's just recapitulate a little bit. Take your right hand, thumb upwards, and stick it right in the brown space between the frog and the thumb rest. Now for your pinky finger, you set it right on top of the eye of the bow, rounded and relaxed. Remember not to do this or that or any, weird actions with your finger, but just set it relaxed on top. And, slowly start releasing here with your left hand so that you can feel how your pinky finger starts to work to keep the bow balanced. Then take your middle finger and ring finger together and relax them on top of the bow, covering the thumb. You see the thumb has this little window where it's peeking out. You're going to cover that with your two fingers, and then your index finger curling around the silver winding of the bow right here. Now, as an extra tip, I would ask you to consider leaning your hand slightly forward, slightly towards the tip of your bow, slightly that way, so that your fingers are kind of diagonal. That's going to come in very handy later. But if you're doing this, your fingers are standing up, or even worse, if they're diagonal, if they're leaning in the opposite direction, that's going to make things a lot harder later on. So make sure that you lean your hand slightly forward so that, in a few words, you can better transmit the weight of your arm onto the bow once we start actually interacting with the violin. So all fingers in place, and then lean your hand forward. Now in the next part, we're actually going to talk about some bow hold exercises that are going to come in very handy and that are going to help you actually hold the bow the right way as quickly and as stably as you can.